This is a little bit different type of talk. It seems the room's pretty thin, so maybe I didn't do a good job describing. This is definitely a talk about breaches, but not just breaches. It's a talk about what is going on. There's a lot of us out there who are a little bit fed up with, some of the stuff that's going on, especially with breaches nowadays. And if you use Equifax as a quick example before I get started here, that's a company with plenty of capital, plenty of money, plenty of expertise on hand, and how they let certain things slip away from them is a little bit frustrating. There's plenty of us who've been kind of preaching the same thing for years, and we're sick of listening to ourselves. So when you see people get on the offensive, and you see people say things that are derogatory, just know that breaches can happen to everybody, and we realize that. But when certain places breach not just your personal data that you didn't consent to them having, but it's also a breach of trust, right? Breach in itself is not just losing your data that's been lost 30 times. It's the level of trust that an organization and it forms that relationship with you as a consumer. Some good has happened with some of the breaches, right? So there's one thing I can think of is that Target right now has one of the best blue and red teams in the country, I believe. I know the gentlemen who run each of those teams at Target, and they're a phenomenal group. Now, it sucks that they had to have a wake-up call like they did, but it happened. So as I get started here again, title of the talk is What Up Breaches? I don't see a lot of children in the audience, which is good because I'm going to get a little colorful here and there. But I want this talk to be interactive. Right? This is a small enough group. If anyone here has ever been to ShmooCon before, feel free to throw something at me that won't injure me if you want to call bullshit. I would love to discuss it. If you have any questions, speak up. Some familiar faces in here, and there's going to be some good examples. So I had some ideas for this talk. I have some teenage daughters, so this right here is indicative of that. So the talk was almost titled Drop Database Breaches or Drop Your Breaches. Unfortunately, I did see a Splunk t-shirt like that years ago. I was going to do Breaches Are Crazy, but then I started to think about any implications of that. And with that, we'll get started. Quick intro. I know I was introduced earlier. Ralph is here. He also runs the OWASP chapter with me in Columbia. I'm primarily an application security guy nowadays. I've done a lot of things. Previous lives obviously started in help desk, went to sysadmin, network engineer, some pen testing and bug bounty, and I was a CIO CISO at some point in my life. That was in the past. Personal life, in case you care. I am a husband, a father. I do have a farm, believe it or not. I like to break things, I like to build things, and most importantly, I end up fixing a lot of stuff. And again, one of the motivations for this talk was just being one of those guys who's tired of being ignored for years and years and years. And I'm tired of getting the emails. I'm tired of getting the free identity protection. I'm pretty sick of it. I'm sick and tired of it. And that really leads me on to my next slide. So I feel like, we lose control of some basics. And by basics, I don't mean basics as far as things that Jack mentioned, right? Jack had some really good foundation points. I'm talking about basics of our modern day InfoSec and application security departments, those kind of basics. Basics that we function at on a daily basis that should be baked into the processes that we hold, and they're not. And I want to bring some of those points up. I've seen what works. I've seen what doesn't. I've seen too many mistakes. Again, nobody is breach-proof. We all can be breached, but I think that we can do better. Again, sophisticated attacks do exist, and if a nation state or an ODE is targeting you from China or Russia, you probably don't have a good shot at being successful. They're probably going to win. But are nation states attacking, most of the breaches that you're getting notified for? I mean, aside from, OPM or Blue Cross, I guess, Anthem. Aside from those, are most of the notifications that you're getting from people who've been targeted? No. Is everyone in here facing power system type of breaches on mass scale with Israeli governments? Probably not. So those are the ones that that really focus on here. There's a lot of simple solutions out there. There's a lot of tactics. There's a lot of questions that can be asked and answered that aren't being asked and answered. And I just want to kind of play on those now. So without further ado, let's take a quick look at this. I know that the slide's a bit small in text. I got this information from Breach Level Index. It's just one source of breaches, but these were the top scoring data breaches. Like, it was a great achievement for them to be a top scorer here. So they're like, hey, we got 10s, yes, right? But what I want to focus on here is the source of the breach, right? Malicious outsider. Do we have an insider? Yeah, we have an insider. We have one insider there, and that was the Korea Credit Bureau, right? So every time that someone says the insider threat is real, it is. It's 100% real. But most of these breaches that piss me off are not because someone's in there stealing USB drives full of company secrets. It's malicious outsiders, right? Let's go back to my state-sponsored. Sure, we have Anthem here, right? State-sponsored. You're not going to win if someone's targeting you that, you have the entire government of a country focusing on you. The chances are you're going to get popped sooner or later with some tactic. That's just how it goes. But that's one, right? That's one. The rest of these here are malicious outsiders. The industries are obviously varied. We have financial and retail being the top ones. But the fact of the matter is that this malicious outsider is using things to get in that are fairly common most of the time. And I'll pick on some in a little bit. Statistics, some scary stuff. That's count decimal places. We're talking trillions. These are trillions of records. But even worse, every day we're talking 5 million records. You break this out by hour and by minute and by second, it's ridiculous. So let's look at this, right? Breaches that were deemed useless because proper encryption was done. 4%. 4% of the data was encrypted that was stolen. The other 96% was plain text. That sucks. We can do better than that. The unfortunate part, hey, I'm a dad, so there's a lot of dad humor in here. So, if you don't like a lot of the memes and stuff, then you can just ignore it. You can throw something soft. I don't know, maybe water. But sometimes breaches happen. Sometimes they happen. There's no question about that. And the main question I have is why. There's a lot of reasons. We went over these, but there's some here that I haven't touched on yet. And these are the ones that I'm going to focus on. So, determined, sophisticated, that's your nation state, your insider, yeah, okay, they do exist, it's real, address it. Now, as we go forward, complexity and difficulty of environments. No matter what, this usually has something to do with the breach. Our environments have become so muddled and disorganized that very, very basic hygiene procedures are not being practiced. How many environments out there that you say, oh, well, just apply the patch, and then there's the whole other camp that says, we can't just apply a patch. Do you know how difficult that is? Well, yeah, I do. And the difficulty and complexity of environments really needs to be wrangled. And that brings us to patches. Yes, I see things all the time where there are not patches being applied. Carelessness and laziness. That does happen. Again, unfortunate, and it sucks. Negligence. That's interesting. You can ask AT&T how negligence feels. I think that they are paying one of the largest fines for breaches ever been levied. Fines are coming. And, a lot of the organizations also, on the smaller side, I guess, smaller and medium, resort to something like this. And I've seen this. We couldn't hire the cybersecurity candidate you sent us. He's saying too many scary things about our computers. Yeah. The chances are that there are a lot of scary things that need to be said about your environment. So we can't fix everything. Let's start with the ones that we can. We can do better. I feel like, again, part of the motivation here is we are focusing on too many vendor-centric, next-gen, artificial intelligence, machine learning, blockchain, magic, blinky light, boxes that are just pieces of shit that could do anything most people could do with decent amount of scripting. There are good commercial solutions out there, but there are way too many solutions to problems that may or may not exist. We need to take a step back, we need to breathe, and we need to answer some questions. The next few slides are real questions from real clients. I have a former colleague in the room sitting over here. His name is Jason Kent. All of these questions have been fielded by us. These are real questions and answers. And these are the questions we need to start to ask. Quick things. How many web applications do you have in your environment? About, we think? I don't know. Well, guess what? The one you have sitting behind the Imperva that you're spending $1 million on, that's great. You're securing that one. What about the other ones? The ones that you don't know about. You don't care. I care. Do you have an accurate asset inventory? Do you know what you should be protecting? Right? Am I dropping O-days on you? No. I'm asking you simple questions. Do you know what should be secured? Mostly. Mostly bullshit. Do you scan constantly? Are you constantly checking your environment for vulnerabilities all the time? No, we can't, because something could break. If we constantly are testing these things, we only have maintenance windows where we can test. I understand, that's great. Yeah, so what you need to do is you need to put something out there that says that, hey, hackers, you can only look at our systems during these maintenance hours, during these hours where you're allowed to take a look at our systems. And if your shit falls over because I run an Nmap scan at it, you have other issues. If I cannot scan your enterprise database in a financial institution because it will fall over and I'm using Nmap, you have a bigger problem. Real things. And that currently exists at a very large place today. What is your patching cycle? What is your tolerance for critical severity vulnerabilities? If I find out that there's a critical severity vulnerability, how long do you have to patch that? How long is acceptable in your production environment? Is it more than 24 hours? Is it 48 hours? How long does it take for a piece of POC code to pop up on GitHub? Is that what you're racing? Maybe. Not usually a good answer there. This is all real data. None of this is okay. None of this is fine. We need to do better on the basic questions and answers. All right, more fun. I can't get away from these because this is one of my favorite questions. Do you know what your real perimeter is and what is open on it? Anyone have a good answer for what your real perimeter is?
There isn't one.
Excellent. So there used to be a perimeter. It used to be a nice fortress that you can build a big wall around and put barbed wire up, and that's your perimeter, and you're good. Well, guess what? Every web browser, every mobile device, every piece of connectivity, every line of code that you have running that's externally accessible is your perimeter. What's open? No idea. No idea. Ports that are open. Walking into a Fortune 10 customer, I can show you ports that are open on your externally facing environment that you probably did not know that were there. It's pretty scary. Training. No one wants to pay for training. We have all these fancy tools. Well, guess what? If you don't have the right trained individuals to use these fancy tools that you're spending millions of dollars on, you're going to have really fancy tools and a whole lot of data that you can't use or you don't know how to use to be, basically you're throwing away money. Encryption. Usually everyone is quick to answer this question, no matter where I am. Is your sensitive data encrypted every single time with 90%, 95% of the time? Yes, absolutely. Well, guess what? If 4% of the breaches never had any encryption on them, then that means, I don't know, 90% of the people are lying to me? Probably. It happens. Let's go back to network security. Jack touched on this. It was the basis for a lot of what exists out there in pen testing teams. It exists, the basis of what exists today for a lot of InfoSec teams to begin with is network security. There's a gentleman, his name is Paul Coggin. I don't know if anyone knows him. He's from Alabama. If anyone's ever seen him talk, he works for Wells Fargo. He is a Cisco guy, an old Cisco guy who's now a network security guy. He focuses on very advanced pen testing using only network layer vulnerabilities. If you ever get a chance to watch any of his talks, you'll understand. And where I'm going with this is it's even scarier because this is turning to application. So software-defined networks, SDNs, your Cisco guys, right? Or your network guys who are down on your NetOps team, how many of those guys write Java? Well, guess what? That's where it's going. So all of your automation, all of your fallback, all of your networks, they're all going to code. It'll all be software defined, and that will bring us a whole new level. So basics. I can sit up here and preach basics, but I'm not making this stuff up. I didn't write this stuff. These are your CIS 20 controls, right? Basic controls are basic for a reason. You don't need a shiny vendor product for many of these. Again, what's important for your environment may differ from what's important in someone else's environment. Sometimes it's the little things like inventory, and Jack did mention ingress and egress filtering. So let's talk about egress filtering for a second. Why does your point of sale terminal that you swipe your credit card on to pay for something, why does that terminal need to be able to talk to any IP in any country on any port? Why does that point of sale terminal need to be able to talk to Russian hackers doing Chinese anime at midnight on a Friday? Like, why does it need to talk there? Simple rules. You think I'm crazy, but the exfiltration of the data from memory happens on these point of sale terminals, and then those point of sale terminals actually exfiltrate the data out. Yes, a lot of the newer ones are using 443 and it might go out HTTP and it needs to talk there. But why do they need to talk? Your point of sale terminals only need to talk to 1 or 2 IPs. That's it. You should have egress filtering set up. You should not have these terminals being able to talk to everything. Target was a perfect example of that. Their point of sale terminals had egress to 0000, 0000. So they could talk to anything, anywhere, at any time. Simple things. We don't need these point-of-sale terminals to be able to talk to. They need to talk to a couple of IPs. Or maybe your basic control falls here. Now, I can argue that 18 is not a basic control, but maybe some things about it are, right? Maybe it's AppSec. Maybe it is application security. And application security can be tough. I'm an AppSec guy here, so I'm going to dive into this for a second. Not so basic, but a quick fact. This quick fact is brought to you by a friend of mine who is formerly at Verizon. His name is Vic Esponsa. He actually published this DBIR, and this is his chart. Web app attacks, we all know. #1 source of data breaches. Why? Anyone know who this guy is? Anyone in this? Alan Jackson. All right, we got one person in the room. All right. Anyone know why? Well, AppSec is hard. Yes, it is. I thought that people are saying, I thought this talk was going back to basics. Good catch. And if I say application security is hard, we do go back to basics, but hear me out. Alan Jackson reference, top of the slide. If you don't get it, it's fine. It's lame, but it's me. Remember when I talked about inventory? Now, say we're talking about a normal inventory of IT assets and computer systems. What about your web app inventory? It's also an inventory. Remember when I talked about perimeter and understanding what your perimeter is, understanding what web servers are out there with what open. That's all your perimeter. Yeah, that also counts. I talked about scanning and patching. Scanning and patching, not just operating systems and network devices, but patching vulnerable. What if you're using a vulnerable library in one of your applications? That patch counts just as much as a stupid Microsoft Office patch counts. Why should that patch take any less precedence on your external facing system than an Office patch or a Microsoft Server patch? And unfortunate reality is that those patches are getting pushed way down the line compared to your OS patches. And understanding that and applying those basic concepts to application security can help you. Remember when I talked about encryption? Yeah, that's an important one for web apps. Maybe we should think about that too. There's a big push for HTTPS and your little green shiny lock. Oh, that's wonderful, but what about the data that sits behind it? Maybe we should ask those questions too. Firewalls. Everyone in this room, I guarantee, has a network with a firewall, right? Why? Why do you have it? Because it's important, right? You need a firewall there. Well, now what about your perimeter applications? Why should they be treated any differently? You have a firewall sitting in front of your desktop at your desk that's sitting behind some switches and routers and things. Why shouldn't there be a firewall or something protecting those web applications that's also has critical data? Like your workstation versus a web app. Like there needs to be protections there. Addressing the majority of the OWASP top 10. To me, those basic functions need to happen in their application security just as your 20 critical controls need to take place. Multi-factor authentication. To me, that needs to be basic. How many of these things can be protected with multi-factor authentication? We are in the state of South Carolina. Everybody who lives in South Carolina, please raise your hand, who has lived here from, let's say, 2013 to today. Okay. All of you are victim to a breach that happened because there was no MFA. There was no multi-factor authentication on the system that was able to get the data. The person had legitimate credentials. The hack occurred with legitimate credentials, so there wasn't a patch not applied. They were credentials that were compromised. So if I log into a state computer system remotely, and it's been fixed, but let's hypothetically, hear me out, back when this happened, I log into this computer system remotely. I have legitimate credentials. I'm using an IP address. Now, okay, let's pretend that I decided to use a local proxy. So the local proxy doesn't look out of place. I'm not accessing it from some server in China or something like that. And I log in. And now I take all the data I want. I compress it. I encrypt it. I FTP it out. whatever. We talk about egress, but that's a whole other thing. Simple multi-factor authentication for systems that contain critical data. That breach, which cost our state millions, whoever has SCIDprotection.com, everybody in here that raised their hand, could have been avoided with one simple multi-factor authentication. That was that one particular instance. I won't say it's good for everything, but it happens. Now the other side. We're all smart, intelligent people. It can't be this easy. I'm making it sound like people are simply choosing not to do these things. If these were indeed basics, and the basics could protect us, why couldn't these large, technically savvy companies with really capable individuals and budgets not solve these problems already? Why wouldn't the breaches just stop? Am I oversimplifying things? Let's go back to those questions real quick, right? Do you think I'm oversimplifying things? Do you think anything I'm saying has been oversimplified? No one wants to talk. All right. So, the first thing we need to know as we dive into this and those questions on the other side of it, and this is important to understand both sides, right? You can't just be on the offensive. You have to put yourself in the shoes of making things better. So making things better all comes back down to we're all human. We make human mistakes. We screw up. I screwed up earlier this week. Said something I shouldn't have said to someone I shouldn't have said it to. It ended up in a slight breach of trust, and it was a pain in the ass. I screwed up. We spend too much time checking boxes. I've been on way too many engagements where someone says, will this cover me for X? And X is checking a box. And the answer is like, yes, but, and they don't want to hear it. I think that a lot of the mentality of checking boxes really needs to change. And that can't change without top-down security support. Top-down support starts at your C-level. The unfortunate reality is if you don't have that support from the C-level, you're going to be checking boxes and you're not going to be successful. Another thing that might have to do with this is that, with all the security breaches in the news, there are budgets. And with budgets, people like to spend the money. And they spend the money so they can get another budget the next year. Because if you don't spend it, you're not going to get it renewed. So with that, they buy a lot of stuff. They buy stuff. And with that stuff, what do you think they forget to buy? They forget to buy training. They forget to equal budget their products with their implementations. Consultants, their implementations, professional implementations, they buy stuff and they're not focusing on that. A lack of training, again. I can say this very firmly. Training trumps tools. Be smart, use both, but your training will always trump the tools. Now let's dive a little deeper. We're going to do a little scuba. And a lack of understanding in the complex environment is key to understand why sometimes these basics get lost. And I think that that's kind of a given. But the next one's huge, right? So why do these basics not always work, too? Is because we're spending money on these tools and we're trying to show something that's almost impossible. Your ROI on security. If I never get breached and I spent $10 billion on it, is there something that says, ROI on security is tough. Is there something to say that if I didn't do it, I would have been fine with only 10 million? Maybe. I think security also is looked at as not a business problem, but more of an IT problem when it's really not. It focuses on your business. Everything about your business is now related to IT. If you take the IT department out, can your business function without IT at all? If the answer is yes, great, throw the slide away. If your answer is no, then obviously security is not just an IT problem. It's a complete business problem, and there's impacts to be had. Scan, patch, basics, all things, not just important things, not just your main website. What about your interfaces, your middleware? Secure all of them, all of the weakest links. And the unfortunate part, again, is something to avoid here. And this is a quote by Darren Boozer, who's the CEO of NCC Data. And then the unfortunate part is apathy. Enterprise companies today, right, they have the right procedures and teams to prevent attacks, but the perception that your business is safe leads to apathy. No empathy for them. Apathy. Cyber criminals, remember I mentioned earlier about your maintenance windows? Cyber criminals are constantly looking for vulnerabilities. To stay ahead of this, your trained IT teams need to be looking 24/7 and upgrade packages of software. And, you know, this quote is great. I just hope, you know, I really hope that people can take it into better consideration. A little bit of what the future will hold. Here's what I think. I want to spend a few minutes on this slide in particular. Cyber insurance and guarantees. With the amount of breaches and things that are happening out there, are companies out there who are really leveraging to put insurance policies or sell insurance policies to corporations. And that cyber insurance would essentially limit their liability from any breaches, or knock down their liability, right? If not totally nullify them from liability. Now that leads us to an interesting question. What if I owned a company, and I really want feedback on this one, please. If I owned a company and I can buy a cyber insurance policy that would cover me for $5 million a year, but my security spend would have been $10 million for the year to cover me. How do you justify to your stakeholders that you should be spending the money on security and not just saying screw it and buying your breach insurance for half the money?
That doesn't work. Trust. That doesn't work anymore.
Go ahead.
So I work in this space a lot, and the insurance companies will call me. I will come do an assessment of what you've done, and I'll tell them they did nothing, and they won't pay. They'll give you your premium back.
Perfect.
And then they use companies like BSidesCHS to kind of like a FICO score.
Okay.
You can show past examples where there were breaches and the insurance company turned around and said you didn't comply with what you had in the contract.
Pre-existing condition, right? So they're going to deny you for pre-existing condition, essentially, right? They're going to show a pattern there, maybe negligence.
What about protecting the people that own that information that the company is keeping, protecting the customers? So it doesn't protect them.
Yep, excellent point. So that brings us to guarantees. There are companies out there who are guaranteeing with high amounts of money that you won't get breached if you use their services. There's two things there. One, it's putting your money where your mouth is. And two, it's using the expertise that they can offer. Anyone have any feedback on the cyber guarantees of guaranteeing a customer won't get breached if they use us for X up to $1 million?
They have cyber insurance?
They don't need cyber insurance, so I do this. Right? I offer a $5 million guarantee on code security and $1 million on your perimeter if we manage vulnerability analysis. The way it works is I have E&O insurance. So I have this big E&O policy, and I have a whole bunch of people that have been doing this for 20 years. So when we point at it, we say, listen, do what we say, and I promise you won't get breached. In fact, I back it up with $1 million. This is a sales pitch. I won't tell anyone here who I work for. You can go Google it. But the fact that we offer this service gets a lot of people to go, well, that's interesting. And then they go back to not having inventory, not patching, right? They don't come to us in droves like we sort of thought they would, simply because no one cares about this insurance aspect, right? It's not that you're not configuring it correctly, it's that you're not doing it at all.
Yeah. There's no accident.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Have you ever had anyone take you up on it?
Yeah.
How do you audit that they actually have done what you said? How do you continuously check to make sure they haven't gone back?
So we run a split program. I run a managed program, and I let the client do whatever it is that they want to do with the tools. But I have a report I deliver every week that says you haven't done these things and you're out of compliance right now.
Got it. Cool.
So there's no accident these two things are up there. If anyone here follows Jeremiah Grossman or other people, they know that these things are real, right? The push for cyber insurance, which I think is a terrible idea, is that agenda is still being pushed. Whether it's going to work or not, it's still being pushed. Guarantees, more and more coming out there. Now, we talk about liability and fines. Now, I think that the liability for companies who can't do the basics. Now, I'm talking about Equifax again because they pissed me off a little bit here. So, if you have a portal open with admin, is that neglect? And externally facing, is that neglect? Like for a company like Equifax, not for Joe who owns the coffee shop on the corner maybe, but for a company like Equifax that houses all of your sensitive data. Question?
So my question to you is, yes, and the Equifax handled this very, very poorly. I mean, they took more time to cover their tracks than to tell people what was going on. But anyhow, so my question to you as a professional is, do you think that regulations and regulations will fix that? So I'm not for...
But that comes with the liability, right?
They were violating regulations when they got breached.
They're violating regulations, existing regulations today. There are states that require notification of a data breach. I know for a fact that they have not yet notified residents of those states. They're breaking existing regulations. And where does it come in? The only thing that's going to hurt them is the wallet, right? When the CEO decides to leave but takes a 7 or 8 figure check with them, they don't give a shit. They're like, hey, this is great. I'm going to go on the beach. Have a nice day. I mean,
$8 million, that'll
yeah,
teach you.
exactly. For a company like that, you know? And another thing, bug bounties. They work. They're going to increase. Not everyone's a good candidate for them. But bug bounties work, and I think that that's something that needs to keep going forward. Now, free pen tests for everyone. This comes back to my earlier inclination of when you can test. I promise you that whether you like it or not, your company's getting a free pen test right now. They are getting a free pen test right this second. Everybody that's sitting in this room that has a presence, publicly facing presence, is getting a pen test right now for free. Now, the difference is these guys want to be paid for it, but they'll tell you about it. And the other difference is the other people, they might want to be paid for it too, but they're going to just go sell it on .onion somewhere and have a nice day on the dark web. Or, who knows, maybe just for kids. But
You gotta go find the report on the dark web.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is what I found. So, bug bounties, I'm a big advocate for, always have been. I'm more than willing to talk to anybody on that, but I think that they work very well. I don't think that they replace pen testing. I think it's a good supplement, and I think that as long as your maturity level as an organization to understand where those and how to fix those vulnerabilities and address them are up to par, then they can be super beneficial for you. Consultancies. Use them. There are a lot of really good consultancies. There are a lot of shitty ones. There are a lot of companies who will tell you who the good ones are. And if anyone here works for Deloitte, I'm sorry.
No, they're number one.
They're number one, yes. Gartner has put them in that magic quadrant in the top right. They are the number one cybersecurity consultancy in the country, according to Gartner. So C-levels automatically are going to hire those, right? And then they're part of the big three.
What year was that, though?
2017 is June published, but they're still plugging it. So if they're still publishing the article, it was published in June. So timing-wise, it's interesting, but the fact that Deloitte is using that information to advertise today is kind of still, I don't know, it's kind of ballsy in my opinion, right? But it's marketing, and they need to make business, and there are a lot of good people there. I have some friends that are there, so, but pick your consultancies wisely. A big push here that I like to see too, and there's a really good talk later at 3 p.m. In this room about what to do when someone wants to disclose vulnerability to you. I'm just going to touch on this real quick, but adding a security.txt to all of your external facing applications that simply has, hey, our security address is this, our PGP is this, put that in there. I mean, there's a lot of times, and Jason's going to go into it in depth, but there are a lot of times where there's just way too many vulnerabilities, and we as hackers find these things, and sometimes I find them by accident when I'm online shopping. But anyway, so being able to disclose these is not always easy. So if you're trying to secure, have a way for someone to report, have a way for someone to report something to you. And I know that this is also part of a problem, a little bit, probably not so much with a lot of this group, but the InfoSec ego, lose it. I don't care how many followers on Twitter you have. I really don't. Lose the ego. If you need help, ask for it. There are a lot of good people in this room who've been doing a lot of things in different niche areas for a long time. I'm looking around the room and I recognize definitely some really amazing talent. So ask questions. Whitney's hiding over there. I see her. So there's a lot of good people here. Feel free. Ask for help, network. Remember, we're dentists. And with that, I'm running out of time. But before I run out of time, BSides is an amazing place. I'm not up on a stage in front of 100 people. I'm not talking about Python-based security systems like my last talk here. We're not in the weeds with this talk, but what I like to do is network. And I think that the feedback and the amount of communication we can have is extremely beneficial. So as a group, we'll take the last couple minutes here I think we have. Yeah, last 4 minutes or so, and let's interact with each other. Let's ask some questions, concerns. Let's get some things going, if we could.
I had a follow-up to your reporting thing for security TXT. So we report something that's like legitimate. I would encourage people to respond.
Yeah.
Reported things and then people
Come to
don't
my talk.
Come to Jason's talk at 3. It's all about, his name of his talk is Are You Ready? And that's all how to respond.
Yeah.
Because if you don't respond,
Because
yeah.
someone's going to reply. It's not going to, they find a second thing, they're not going to send it to you. And then you're in the same hole you were in the beginning.
No, it's going to full disclosure. Yeah, absolutely. Anybody else? Yeah.
What do you see as the differences between leadership that do take security seriously and that do not take security seriously, and how can somebody demonstrate to leadership that they should be taking security seriously?
That's an excellent question. I think, so leadership that takes security seriously, and I believe I mentioned that in one of my slides, one of the key indicators there that I find a commonality with is people's support for training. Having people come to these events or come to Blackout or come to training events, get hands-on training, taking classes, whether it's SANS, whether it's specific other training that interests people. But keeping training up is usually a good indicator. Now, I don't say it's a one-for-one, but I will say that it's usually a good indicator of leadership dedication to usually people or places that are better off holistically on the security front than others. Other things too are, having red teams and blue teams on both sides and keeping those exercises to work and feed off of each other. It sounds kind of old and stale, but I'm seeing a lot of that do more good lately, and morphing into these purple type of teams and things where you have exercises, where you have attacks and defenses going on simultaneously, and then sharing that information and knowledge with each other. And usually anyone who gives that kind of flexibility to hiring, the right kind of people and bringing those people in are usually in a better spot. Anyone else?
Along the lines of showing return on investment for security, what if you could show, the latest patches come out, Microsoft security patches, there's some vulnerability. What if you could show from your external interfaces who is trying to actively exploit that vulnerability? And the fact that you patched it means that you prevented that. You've shown some return on the work done.
So one thing that I left off of here, and it's my bad, so I made a mistake, is metrics. It's part of that top 20, but I think metrics is a huge, huge part of being able to show effectiveness. Being able to self-report, being able to report on what you've done, and obviously what you're saying is even going beyond that, right? It's showing actionable metrics that what you actually stopped. And I think that metrics is a huge part, and what you have to do is assess and reassess and constantly update leadership on those metrics. So it's not just, it's not just running the metrics, but it's presenting it in an executive format, presenting it in a readable, easily readable format, and then doing it on a regular basis to show progress, to show the curve, show exactly what you're doing and how things are getting better. So
Be careful
that's on
with
me.
metrics. You got to be careful with metrics though, because if you're using vendor metrics are always geared toward showing their success. We found all these problems. Yay! No.
Yeah, what did you do to fix the problems that they found? So metrics is good, but as you mentioned, definitely keep that in. And I think if anyone, we got one more. All right.
So since you mentioned metrics, I teach here at the College of Computer Science, and I do research also from the academic perspective, but not the business metrics, but the scientific metrics, like repeatable, reproducible metrics. So mean time to failure is one that we use quite a lot. So do you see that happening in the industry, like hard science metrics, not the business?
I'm gonna separate that a bit though. I'm gonna put that in analytics, and I'm gonna use a lot of I'm seeing a lot more analytics in data science, and that's it's related, but the analytics related to large organizations that have data scientists that work together to be able to increase efficiencies and show those values. Really have more advanced analytics platforms, but I am seeing that, but it's really only the big people that are doing anything like that. As you probably know, data scientists are not cheap. So advanced analytics and data science is definitely an area of growth, and I see a lot more large industry, especially your Amazons and things like that, who are using those for efficiency and for tweaking and tuning and saving probably astronomical amounts of money in data. Going once, going twice. Oh, almost sold.
Last one.
Yeah.
So going along with the metric stuff, I mean, do you see there's a space where they might try and push some sort of industry type of guidelines or standards? Because we all know metrics, either from a business or scientific perspective, and they're easily manipulatable.
Yes, they
some
are.
vendor metrics will show they're great.
Yeah,
Even
like the
business
lost
metrics,
benchmark
we can
project.
have it set up where it's like you may be doing terrible, but all the numbers look great.
Yeah, I see no immediate. I don't see any immediate. I see nothing moving in the direction of standardization for metrics across the industry as of right now. If you could come up with something, that'd be great. But I personally don't see it. Not yet. All right. I'm told I'm out of time. Thank you, everybody. Here's my contact information. Pretty easy to find. If you see me around, I'll be around today if you have anything follow up. Thanks.